Now tonight, I would like to start with the topic about the heart, because I think here in the Philippines, heart diseases are quite everywhere. Because in the Philippines and pretty much everywhere in the world, heart disease is the #1 killer. And heart disease is a lifestyle disease. You can see this slide, and I know you will see this again in the coming nights. I'd like you to take note that lifestyle diseases are not just genetically related. There are diseases that has something to do with what you eat and your physical activity. Now, many months ago, an article was shown in the Manila Bulletin. It says, there is a silent disaster killing about 800 Filipinos every day. That's about 2 747 jets crashing every day. And the article says there is an epidemic of non-communicable diseases such as stroke, heart disease, and cancer, among others. And it says that the scientific community has failed to anticipate and prevent it. Which means we doctors, the scientific community, have failed the Filipino people with this. And that is correct. In medicine, nutrition is not something that we are taught in medical school. It's something that's not given importance. And if you would like to know about nutrition, you would have to read a lot after you finish medicine. It says, to continue, advances in medicine have failed to curb this epidemic, and a steady rise in deaths have been noted for the past decade. So Filipinos are dying of these non-communicable diseases. Now, 50 years ago, man dies by infection, pneumonia. But today, it's no longer the case. Essentially, the article is saying, today, we have a lot of medicines. We have so much advancement in diagnostics, but still, diseases are on the rise. Now, in the coming nights, we will learn why is this so. In the Philippines, around 100,000 Filipinos die every year. That's about 1/5 of our total deaths, making it the #1 killer in our country. Who is at risk? Let me ask the question, who is at risk? I would like to know who among you here is at the age of 15 to 25. Just 15 to 25. Can you raise your hands? There's quite a few. 15 to 20, yes, 15 to 25. I would like to tell you that you are at risk for heart disease. Yes. And then you ask here, hey, dear doctor, that's something new. 15 to 25, are you sure? I thought it was like around 50s or 60s. No, times have changed. You see this girl in here? She's at risk of heart disease. Well, we are taught in medicine that, I'm going to explain this one. The heart disease doesn't start at age 30 or 40. It starts at childhood. Now, this word, it means, you know, from the heart, for your body to pump the blood out of the heart into the parts of your body, it has to pass through blood vessels. We call that arteries. And then when your arteries, when they get inflamed, when you age, they become thicker and narrower. And so, by the age of 40, 50s, you're going to start having trouble with the heart disease. Now, if you can see this picture, this is how your arteries or blood vessels look like when you are around 10 years old. But when you are around 15 to 25 years old, notice here that the problem is actually starting. It does not start up here, it starts around here. They've been doing autopsies with children and they found out that as early as 15 years old, there could be this problem in your blood vessels. So, if you were continuing with your normal lifestyle, with your normal diet, with your regular activity, by the age of 40 or 50s, that's when you have the symptoms of a heart problem. But it did not start there. It started where? Around 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So the World Heart Federation, the one that made our World Heart Day, says that the risk factors for cardiovascular diseases are determined to a great extent by behaviors learned in childhood. It's not in adulthood, it's in childhood. And continued in adulthood, such as these behaviors include dietary habits. So, eating an average Filipino diet means dying an average death. And the average death is heart disease, heart attacks. So the question is, how can we prevent it? Our number one killer. How can we prevent dying an average death by our number one killer? Number one is to avoid trans fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol. Now, I am not going to take up all of this today. There will be a second part of this tomorrow. We were going to talk about this first thing here. It's trans fat. But I would like you to remember this slide. You will encounter this again in the coming lectures, and I would like you to remember these things every time we have our lectures. Trans fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol. Yes. So where is it found? Well, it's found in cakes, and in microwave popcorns, and in pancakes, and ice creams, and cookies. Pretty much everything we eat every day. It's not, well, these are the examples, but the trans fat is not limited to these pictures. They're in every processed food that you have in the supermarket. And they are found naturally, even if you don't cook them, in all meat products. They all have trans fat. So if you would group them into just two groups, it's basically telling you that trans fat is found in processed products and all meat products. And if that is so, what's the problem with trans fat? Now, trans fat is something that you eat, and then your body says, I do not recognize this molecule, and then it cannot be transformed to energy. It cannot be put into any use, and so it just creates a lot of damage inside your system. Because trans fat inside your body is just like plastic. When you eat plastic, your body cannot use plastic, just like trans fat. If trans fat is like plastic, then why is it in food anyway? If it is something that you cannot use, why is it there in the first place? Now, many years ago, when they didn't have the technology that we have right now, they were looking for a product that could give them better taste, better texture, so manamit gid siya, better shelf life, meaning it will last longer in the groceries. It would have a later expiration date, and it should be cheap. And so many years ago, they found that they could use trans fat. And so now a lot of our products have trans fat. But the problem is, today they've known that it creates a problem. It gives humans a shorter human life. And because of that, a lot of food and drug institutions around the globe would like trans fat to be eliminated from the food chain. They just want it gone. They're telling the food industries, okay, we're going to have a meeting. We have to remove trans fat, and we have to find another substitute for it. But in the meantime, we can do something about it. We have to reduce trans fat, but ultimately the goal is to eliminate the trans fat. So while they are busy eliminating and finding a substitute for our trans fat, what are we supposed to do? We are to avoid products that have trans fat. And how do we find trans fat? Now, if you go to your favorite supermarket and then you check the label, it says 0 trans fat. Number one that you should do is to not trust the labels. Why? It says 0 trans fat. What's the problem with that? Now, when you say 0 trans fat, food industries are actually legally allowed to put 0 trans fat in something that has trans fat, as long as it is around 500 milligrams or less. So even if it has a little bit of trans fat, they can legally put 0 trans fat. So do not trust the labels when they say 0 trans fat. There's something in there. Number 2, you check the ingredients. Example, you get a cookie and then it says 0 trans fat. Look at the back. Check the back and look at the ingredients. When it says hydrogenated vegetable oil, that's actually your trans fat. They just change the name and hid it somewhere in there so that people will not be so suspicious that it has trans fat. But if you know better, when you see these labels, it has trans fat. Okay, so much for trans fat. There's another thing that you can do for your heart. You can, a study show that when your diet is composed of foods that are good sources of potassium, you will actually have lower risk of heart disease and cardiovascular diseases. So, I have a question for you, and I think everybody knows this. Where is potassium found? What are foods that are rich in potassium? Oh, that's the most common answer I get. Yes, bananas are a good source of potassium, but there are very good sources, like your raisins, and there are excellent sources of potassium, like your beans. So, where's banana? Here is the USDA list for potassium from the highest to the lowest. And banana is somewhere down there. Okay, let's look there. Number 206, that's your banana. The same potassium content with your avocados and your bamboo shoots. But if you like to eat the foods that are really rich in potassium, you can have your radish and your beans. Yeah, a lot of beans in here. So if you like to have more potassium in your diet, you can eat your beans, and if you want the best, currently it's radish. What more? So we've talked about trans fat, we've talked about potassium. What more can you do for your heart? Now, studies show that if your diet has a lot of fiber in it, you will actually be reducing the risk of having heart disease. So where's fiber in our diet? If animals have bones, plants have fiber. That's the analogy. And this is where you can find a lot of your fiber. You can have your beans again. You see, beans are good sources of potassium. They're good sources of fiber. Beans, beans, beans. Then you have your okra, your oats, brown rice. Basically, it's saying fruits and vegetables. That's your source of your fiber, because there's no fiber in meat products. So fiber in fruits and vegetables will help lower your cholesterol and reduce your risk of having heart disease. So I guess you've learned something tonight. This is not the complete topic for the heart. Tomorrow you should come back for the rest of the topic for the heart disease. But tonight, I know tomorrow some of you would be going on your groceries. I'd like you to remember these 3 things just for now. Number 1, to check the label and see if there's trans fat in here. If there's trans fat, it's not good for your heart, unfortunately. Then you look for the foods that are rich in potassium and in fiber. And with just these 3 items right now in your mind, always when you go to your groceries, you will be reducing your risk for heart disease. Tomorrow, you should not miss this. Tomorrow, we will be answering questions about fats and those stuffs. And if you would like to know the answer to this question, you have to come back tomorrow. If you were trying to avoid heart disease, which one should you avoid? You could do your research tonight, and come back here tomorrow to know the full answer to this. Because tomorrow, we will be tackling more of our number one killer, heart disease.